All right, let's bring this meeting back to order. And our first order of business at this point is item number 10.
Thank you. Item number 10, Department and Committee Reports, non-action items. 10A, 2022 Budget Hearing Number 1, Statutory Presentation of the 2022 Preliminary Balanced Budget. Nikki Simmons, County Controller, Financial Services. Good morning.
Good morning, Commissioners. Nikki Simmons, County Controller. Really excited to be here this morning in front of you to present the Preliminary Balanced Budget for 2022. This is administration's proposal to the Board of County Commissioners for what we believe should be the 2022 balanced budget. This is just the first of 5 hearings that we will have regarding this budget. And I'll talk a little bit more to this later, but this is our first opportunity. We're opening up the budget today for public comment, for commissioner input. No vote is required today, so this is all just an informational session. Definitely open to any questions or comments that anybody has. But this is simply our presentation to you for what we believe should be in the preliminary balanced budget. But there's an opportunity over the next 5 weeks to change anything that needs to be changed as we continue to get more information before the end of the year. So really excited to present this to you today. This is the culmination of a lot of work. Obviously, you know that we start budgeting for the next year early in the prior year. So this is something that your executive team, your countywide elected officials, and county administration have been working very hard on all year long. So I just get to be the messenger for that budget. So I'm excited to share this with you. So today I'm going to be going through the budget process. It mirrors our budget process policy and how we put together this budget. We're going to be looking at our revenues, specifically for property tax, sales tax, for our 2 primary revenue sources, and then changes to our expenditure budget. And then we'll actually be looking at the budget document itself. So one of the things that we look at when we start looking at the budget is the population growth. And as you can see, El Paso County continues to have significant population growth year to year. The 2020 census information was just finalized, so these numbers are going to change a little bit, but this is still the Department of Local Affairs estimates for population growth, growing about 1.5% per year, year over year. Fastest growing county in Colorado, and we are actually now the most populous county in Colorado as well. So with that, we also look at historical annual costs per citizen. So this is the Board of County Commissioners' discretionary budget. So when we talk about discretionary budget, there are a lot of things that are in our overall county budget that the Board of County Commissioners does not have discretion over how we spend those funds. There are funds that come with legally restricted sources, things that are given to us in grants, either through the federal government, state government, or donor-restricted grants, in which the Board of County Commissioners doesn't have discretion on how to spend them. Most of those monies sit either in human services, most of that is human services, some of it is in public safety, and then smaller other grants throughout the county. So the total historical annual cost per citizen for 2020 is $191. We're looking at $202 for 2021 and $213 in 2022. So for the budget process, we stick to our budget process policy and ensuring that we budget in the correct order for things. So we start with the budget for completely restricted funds, and those restricted funds are the things where almost everything that are in them are completely legally restricted. And those 5 funds are your Road and Bridge Escrow Fund. That fund is simply holds the portion of the road and bridge mill levy that is required to be shared back with the cities and towns. So for example, if a property is within, say, the Manitou Springs, half of the road and bridge mill levy must be shared back with with Manitou Springs. And so that fund just holds the in and the out for that. So we budget for that. The Conservation Trust Fund from the GOCO lottery funds is required to be held as a separate fund. Your Household Hazardous Waste Fund for solid waste management, Schools Trust Fund, and then you have one local improvement district right now, which is the Falcon Vista LID. which holds the special assessments in that district. So all of those have been completed, and there are no discretionary funds in there to allocate.
Oh, we have a question from Commissioner Bremer.
And I apologize, this is a super quick one. If you go back 2 slides to that cost per citizen slide, does that include then those restricted and state funds coming through as well?
No, this is just the discretionary
It's just
funds.
the discretionary, okay.
So it does not include any restricted funds that you do not have discretion over.
Okay, thank you.
So after we have completed the budget for the completely restricted funds, then we look at the partially restricted funds. And those partially restricted funds are your funds that have a significant portion of restricted funding, but also can be supplemented with unrestricted funding. So we can allocate sales and use tax or property tax to those funds. So the Community Investment Fund right now, the only thing being funded in it for 2022 is the annual lease obligations on our COPs and our capital leases. And in our budget process policy, that is the first thing that we have to budget for with unrestricted funds, is basically to pay our debt payments. And that's in our process policy as well as in our agreements when we issued those COPs to buy the buildings or capital equipment that we purchased with the capital leases. We promise we will pay those first and foremost before we pay anything else. The next thing we do is make sure that we have fully funded our self-insurance fund. That self-insurance fund, as I talk to every month, has 2 sides to it. We look at the risk and workers' compensation side as well as the health insurance side. And we are self-insured for both of those. We work very closely with actuaries to make sure that we understand the amounts of money that should go into there for the year, the trends and things like that in order to make sure that funds are fully funded. We work with the Health Plan Trust Board, which has been set up by El Paso County. They make the determinations on the benefits for the health insurance side for the following year. That board has worked very closely with our consultants for health insurance premiums, and we saw a slight increase, I think about 1.5% increase in health insurance costs for next year. And those were not passed to the employees. Those will be covered by the employer per the vote from the Health Plan Trust Board. The other part you will see in the self-insurance fund that we have to cover every year is something for a reserve for incurred but not reported claims. Those are claims that happen, say, during 2022, but we might not find out that they happened until sometime in 2023 or even later. So we work with actuaries to determine the funding that goes into the self-insurance fund. The Department of Human Services is also a partially restricted fund. As you're aware, most of the funding coming into that fund to fund human services is state and federally restricted funding for specific programs, but we also match that with county sales tax. So we have to prove to the State Department of Human Services that we have budgeted enough match funding to either meet our required match or our maintenance of effort on each grant in order to accept the allocations that the state DHS gives to us. So in order to do that, we had to increase the county match in our Human Services Fund by $150,000, and that money has been allocated there. Then the next fund we move to is our Road and Bridge Fund. And we have a couple of things we work on there. We have a maintenance of effort with PPRTA that we have to maintain. So we make sure that that is there. And then since 2016, we've made an intentional strategic effort to increase the amount of money going into our roads. And I will talk to that in a few more slides from here when we get into the expenditure budgets of the plan to address the backlog of roads. But this budget does allocate an additional $11 million into the Road and Bridge Fund, specifically for high-impact roads, in addition to other items in the Department of Public Works budget to also address getting the administrative side of building roads done. This money is specifically going to go into contracts for building roads or maintaining roads, things like that. So we will talk to that in a few slides. So the next part of the budget process, we start looking at our revenue estimates. So as you're aware, this year sales tax is up significantly over 2020. And we've talked about reasons why we think that is. There's a lot of unknowns that are going on in our economy right now. We have a lot of federal stimulus funding, but we also have a lot of our county is growing. We have a lot of new businesses that we're seeing our ability to keep our spending local to El Paso County versus having our spending maybe happen in the Castle Rock or Denver metro areas. So we're finding that we're being able to pull our revenues back into local business. So that is increasing our sales and use tax collections. So through July of 2021, our increases are up 25.04% over 2020. Obviously, that's significantly more than projected. We very conservatively projected when we did the budget this time last year. It was, as we're all aware, a lot of unknowns. And we have a lot of unknowns going into 2022 as well. Talking to each commissioner and talking to each economist, nobody agrees with what next year looks like. So my advice is to continue to be conservative and see what, not plan to spend in 20% increases. We're forecasting a 4% budget increase for 2022 over 2021 levels. Right now we're tracking retail being up 21.67% of last year, food services up 27.28%, accommodations up 98%. Accommodations is the one area in 2020 that didn't increase over 2019 levels, and that was because our hospitality industry, our hotels, we're not at capacity with our restrictions on travel and the coronavirus and different events, and so that being up 98% makes sense. We're getting that back to normal. 2020 to over 2019 for retail and food services, those were actually up. And so them being up again this much over 2020 levels was not something we anticipated and was not something when we work with the state economists and local economists that was anticipated either. And so, and I keep making this joke and you guys are probably tired of hearing it, but my crystal ball is broken. We don't talk about 25% increases when we talk about budgeting forecasted sales tax growth. That's not in the wheelhouse of normal. And so for 2022's preliminary balanced budget, we're recommending a 4% increase in the budget because we need to make sure that we're prepared for this to normalize. And so that's our estimate for our request. And so that makes our sales and use tax preliminary budget $154.9 million. And this is just a pretty green chart to put that all together. You can see this, we were up 2020 over 2019 by 9.49%.
I might interrupt for a minute. Commissioner Gonzalez has a question.
So how much is 4% in dollars?
$6 million.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, thank you.
So yeah, and that's, Commissioner, you can see where I came that number from here to here, the 148.9 to 154.9 is the increase from 2021 to 2022.
Oh, I'm sorry. We have a question also from Commissioner Geithner.
Sure. My question, and kind of goes along with that second slide as well there, as we're looking at the gradual stepping up of our budget and per citizen in this is, I would love to see if our Tabor reset were to pass, what these numbers would be as well, if we could get that in the future.
Okay.
Because I don't expect that you have it off the top of your head, Nikki, but I would love to be able to look at that.
Commissioner, to answer your question, these numbers would not change whether or not the Tabor reset passed or not. What would change is how much of it is spendable. So in this budget, I want to make sure, and I should have said this in the beginning, this budget, and actually I think it's on my next slide, is about, assumes that there's no change in our Tabor situation. So this budget, the expenditure budgets assume that that money will be part of a refund or set into some sort of reserve for an overage. So our estimate is still the $154.9 million of the actual revenue. It would just change what is available for appropriation from the revenues. And so in this budget, there's approximately $17 million, which we have not set aside for, which we have not appropriated or proposed for it to be appropriated in the 2022 budget.
So my question remains that what I would love to see is, even if it's not appropriated in this budget, as we are looking what these budgets are, is some sort of estimate that if we were to appropriate that, and I realize it's not in this budget, but if we were to appropriate that, what kind of growth we would be seeing, both in the overall and also per resident. So just for future, I don't expect it off the top of your head, but
Okay.
thank you.
I appreciate that. And I'll follow up more with you out of session to make sure I'm getting the information that you need. So after sales tax, the next thing we look at is property taxes. And we received in August a preliminary certification of valuation from our county assessor's office. This is the assessment that tells us what the valuation is for the overall county. And we were able to go through, because of the growth due to the reassessment, the estimated mill levy is going to have to be reduced going into 2022. That reduction, for that temporary mill levy reduction, is approximately $24.40 on a $350,000 house. It's approximately 0.975 mils. And we have to do that under Tabor. So Tabor not only has the overall Tabor cap that we talk about all the time, but it also has a restriction on just the growth of property taxes. And that's put in place in order to stop exponential growth on property taxes when we see valuations change like we've seen them over the last several years. So, and I have a slide and a couple slides that'll kind of help you understand that a little bit more and how this temporary mill levy reduction affects the overall taxes. And so without that temporary reduction, our allowable mill levy is 8.291, but with this temporary reduction, we are proposing a 7.316 mill levy. And we will receive 2 more updated certifications evaluations, one in October and then one in November, in order for us to finalize our mill levy. So the mill levy is an area that will change just slightly. What won't change is our Tabor cap on property taxes. It might change just a tiny bit based on the growth factor that's part of the Tabor calculation, and the final certification evaluation can change that growth factor. But overall, our overall property taxes is pretty set, and so what might change is the actual mill levy, if we have to reduce it a little more or a little less to stay within that same Tabor allowance for property taxes. In addition to that temporary reduction for the 2022 Tabor cap on property taxes, we also have the 2020 Tabor overage of $7.1 million. And this board has decided to refund that on the 2022 property tax bills. So that will be an estimated 0.752 mill levy credit for about $18.82 on a $350,000 home. And so there will be 2, essentially, oh, I went the wrong way, 2 reductions. One is a temporary mill levy reduction for the current year property tax cap of about $24.40, or that 0.975 mils, and an additional 0.752 mils for $18.82 on the property tax statements for our residents. So our net property tax revenue after the 2020 refund is going to be $60.6 million. And our budget team put together this informational slide just to kind of show when you have an average home. So we did $350,000 home. And this is directly off of somebody's property tax statement and each jurisdiction that they pay property taxes into. Because I think sometimes people think, I pay $1,689 to El Paso County every year. Well, obviously, we are the collection agent for property taxes across the county for all other jurisdictions. And so the two dark blue circles are the amounts that come into El Paso County. And those are our general mill levy and our road and bridge mill levy. And then, so I'm trying to find my slide because I wrote some notes on it. Then the remaining portions go to the other jurisdictions, the City of Colorado Springs, School District 11, or whatever the town or municipality and the school district are for that property. So of this $1,689, about $179 would end up at El Paso County of property tax, for about 10.6% of the overall property taxes collected for this home. And then you can see the effect of, like, part of our mill levy actually goes to the City of Colorado Springs in this instance for the road and bridge share back.
Yes, a question from Commissioner Geithner.
I see the number 350 used a lot when we're having these conversations. I'm just curious, we know that things have gone up significantly, but I know that the assessment rates obviously are not updating on a daily basis like this. Do you know if that 350 is the actual average home cost? Is the assessor's office?
We ask the assessor's office every year for an estimate of, and we round it to the nearest, so we're not talking 348,000, but we do ask the assessor's office every year for an estimate. There have been some articles lately about a $500,000 price point, and so we were like, do we have to use that? And what we found out was that was the average house for sale, but it wasn't the average property value in El Paso County. And so the 350,000, we try to make this accurate to the average property in our community. A few years back, we were using 200 and 250, and it's already up to 350. So significant increases.
Thank you for that clarification. That's what I figured. The assessment value is not quite keeping up with the actual day-to-day, what we see for sale. So thank you for that clarification.
Okay. This is the slide I was speaking to earlier. I tried to put something together to help illustrate the Tabor effect on property taxes, just the property tax calculation. When properties increase their home valuation. So, for example, this property went from $300,000 to $350,000. This is a made-up property. 16.7% increase in valuation. That's about the average increase of value in El Paso County over this reassessment year. And so there's been some news articles like, okay, your property taxes are going up by 16.7%. And when you get that valuation in the mail, it looks like that as well, because the way that the assessor has to report that is if the jurisdictions kept their same mill levy from last time they assessed taxes, this is what your property taxes would be. Well, because Tabor is in place, we are not able to capture 16.7% growth in 1 year. And so we have to issue a temporary mill levy reduction to get that into the correct valuation. And so as you can see, the 2020 mill levy, 8.085, the 2021 mill levy of 7.316, we had to issue a 9.5% temporary mill levy reduction to stay within the overall property tax allowability for this property. Well, and the mill levy reduction is for our overall mill levy, but for this property itself, the property taxes would only go up about 1%. And so...
a question from Commissioner Williams.
And yes, on this, I think this is not, was this our reassessment year?
It is.
Okay, so the next reassessment year won't occur until 2024. It'll
Correct.
be reassessed in 2023, but then 2024.
Correct.
Thank you.
So all property taxes, not including any refunds for over collection in prior years, our property taxes are expected to increase 7.98%. A significant portion of that is due to growth in the county, so construction growth allocation and CPI. And then, so from $62.7 to $67.7 million. So Commissioner Gonzalez, I don't know if you're going to have that same question, but there's a $5 million growth in this property tax revenues. 2021 property taxes per citizen. This is a report that 10 County puts together of the top 10 counties. So City and County of Denver is not included in this because they're a city county and their numbers just don't match to just pure county governments. but you can see the property taxes per citizen of $73 compared to other counties. But realizing that El Paso County now is primarily sales tax funded, so when you put that together with all local tax per citizen, so this includes specific ownership tax, property taxes, and sales taxes, we're at $306 per citizen, and the next closest county, Arapahoe County, is at $332. Another county almost triple our local tax per citizen.
Does that include the public safety sales tax?
Yes,
Okay, thank you.
it does. This is not just unrestricted funds. This is all local tax per citizen. So after we look at those two major revenue components, sales and property taxes, then we work with each department and office to look at their fees. And so we have consistently seen this year, as I give our monthly budget reports to you, that the clerk and recorder's office continues to see high activity. Our planning and community development office continues to see high activity and therefore increased fees. So those increased fees are in the revenue budget in 2022. Our treasurer's office, we have increased that budget. Part of that would be due to this year's budget being a little low, so we've trued that up for next year, plus the increase in property taxes that the treasurer's office will collect for all jurisdictions next year. We charge a fee to do that, that we are charged under statute. And so this is directly reflective of property taxes for other jurisdictions that we will collect. All other departments had minor fee changes up and down, but these are the three that I thought it was important to point out in the presentation. So after we've looked at all the revenues, then we start looking at expenditure budgets. And the way that our budget process policy works is to retain the 2021 expenditure-based budgets, which are the 2021 budgets less any one-time critical needs that were funded into that budget. Obviously, that doesn't reoccur because they were one-time funding. In addition, this budget starts with $26.5 million from departmental underspending, which is essentially the spendable fund balance that we have. So we have more fund balance, and we can talk about reserves here in a couple slides, but we have reserves that aren't spendable that we need to make sure we have to weather rainy days. We have an emergency fund as well. We have a Tabor reserve, but this is the spendable fund balance, so this is the number you'll see at the top of the chart, which shows which critical needs we're funding. And then we start the process of collecting critical needs from each department, seeing what their needs are, having them explain them to county administration, and then we go into the strategy phase where we meet with every countywide elected official, every department executive director, then we meet with them as groups together. This year we had several meetings with each of these groups to kind of do that hard, like give and take sort of process of, everybody has more needs than we're able to fund. So it's good to get those groups in the same room to say, okay, well, you need A and you need B, and it's not our place to say, what's more important as county administration. And so we have them talk through it as well to understand the rest of the needs that are out there in the county versus making those decisions without having everybody talk to each other. So these are really crucial meetings to our budget process, and I'm pleased to report that they went really well this year, and we have consensus from the countywide elected officials and all of our department executive directors of the direction of this preliminary balanced budget. So part of this process is we reevaluate all critical needs that are presented. These are given to us in March of each year, but we continue to evaluate them all year long, seeing if they still fit or if that was a one-time and we were able to fix it another way. Mandated pressures, any sort of increased service demands, any unfunded mandates and or funded mandates, as you're all aware, can sometimes be a problem. This budget does propose a 3.5% allocation of personnel budgets for a cost of living increase. So CPI right now is projected to be 3.5% for 2021 for Colorado. I've seen estimates as high as 3.9, but right now the 3.5 is what the DOLA and the Department of the Bureau of Labor Statistics is thinking will end for 2021. So what we're trying to do with these, this allocation of personnel budgets for cost of living increases is just to not have our employees backslide. So to be able to have them have the same buying power that they have currently for next year, and not have them kind of take a decrease in their standard of living for their role. In addition to that, the additional money from the human capital management funds, the compensation increase funds, are reserved for market adjustments, which will be allocated based on a comprehensive salary study. We have been talking with each commissioner about that it's a plan for us to do a very comprehensive salary study for our county employees to find, we know that we have pockets of employees that we have that are underfunded. And so we're hoping this salary study will be able to identify those pockets and help us decrease costs for, that we're seeing in significant amounts of turnover and employee issues there. So the investment in human capital management is a 3.5% allocation for cost of living and additional reserve for market adjustments for that salary study. In addition, you'll see the other high item in...
Just a quick question. I'm sorry to interrupt, but I know that, in past budget discussions, CPI had to be the Denver Cpi because that was the closest one that was calculated. Is that still true?
It is still true. The only CPI that's calculated in Colorado is Denver, Aurora, Lakewood, and it's the only one where that data is tracked.
So it's still the only one we have available. All right, thank you.
In a lot of years, we know anecdotally that ours maybe wasn't as high as that maybe, but then actually we think this year in talking to local economists, it might be the flip for 2021, 2022, and our cost of living has kind of crept up closer to Denver's than Denver's has increased. And so because it's a percentage change, not a flat number, we know that this year our cost of living locally is rising.
All right, thank you. Oh, a question from Commissioner Geithner.
Just a quick question. Do we have local data on the overall average salary increases that we would see across El Paso County that might give us not just an inflation, but what are other jobs seeing in terms of salary or pay increases?
I don't have that data. I know that our county administrator has been working with our county human resources department to talk to other large employers, talk to other governments, and so we can see what they're proposing. But absolutely, we can see what data we could get you, but I don't have that available at this point.
Okay,
but
thank
more than
you.
happy to work on getting it for you.
Commissioner Geithner, that might be a great question to ask the chamber this morning in the informal meeting, see if they might have that data.
All right. All right, moving on to the high impact road safety projects. As I mentioned, the largest amounts of money that we're allocating in the 2022 preliminary balanced budget are for high impact road safety projects. And so this is an $11 million allocation, $1 million ongoing and $10 million one time to allow the Department of Public Works to strategically address the highest priority of road projects. And so our Department of Public Works is working hard on a list to be able to present to you in their critical need hearing for what projects they are proposing for this $11 million. This is a really exciting amount of money to be able to put into our local roads. I know that's a priority for all of us. And so since 2016, so starting in the 2017 budget, is when we started strategically trying to intentionally increase the overall amount of money put into local roads. And so, as you can see, in 2017, we put $2.3 million ongoing. In 2018, we had funds from the one-time Tabor initiative. $6 million went to I-25, and then $6 million into local roads. And then since then, we have been increasing the allocation into our road and bridge budget. So for 2022, there's a total of $23.1 million, which would be over what was in there in 2016. And which is, you can see the 10 and the 1 on the top of this chart here, which is the 10 million one-time, 1 million ongoing, on top of the 12.1 ongoing that we've already placed in there since 2016. So overall with Tabor, this is something we addressed a little bit earlier on. Back up. I always get a little nervous talking about projections for Tabor because so many things can happen in the Tabor cap. The growth estimate can change, the CPI can change, the CPIs won't be final until next, probably February or March. We're using preliminary certifications evaluations. As I mentioned, we'll be receiving another certification in October and a final certification in November to be able to finalize those. And then also with our sales and use tax growing faster than we're projecting, this is all very preliminary, but right now we're estimating $15 to $20 million for a Tabor overage. That can also be impacted by the amount of state grants we receive for the rest of the year. We got a one-time allocation of highway user taxes last month that we weren't anticipating, or at least the budget office wasn't aware of. And so this is something that I know even the city of Colorado Springs is dealing with, money that's coming in from the state sources that aren't anticipated. So staff is very, very closely monitoring these Tabor revenues. Anything that's coming in right now above and beyond our Tabor cap, we are placing in reserve as unspendable. And then depending on the results from the ballot initiative that we referred, that could either change the budget or keep it as is right now. Compiling this budget for the emergency reserve, the emergency reserve is sitting at $5 million right now. That's the reserve that this board started putting together back in 2018 in order to address having a fund easily available for the Board County Commissioners to get funding for emergencies. Without having to dip into any of our other fund balances. There are no plans to spend into this fund balance at this time. In fact, it is something that county administration is looking at for future of increasing that amount, reassessing if that $5 million is the correct number, possibly looking at increasing that to some other number. And I don't know what that number is at this point, but we do know that a priority for the county, if we're able to, should be to increase this emergency reserve. As you know, we just talked about CPI. Things continue to get more and more expensive, and we want to make sure that we're able to address any emergencies that our county faces. In addition to that, I want to make sure it's clear that that's not our only reserve. We have other reserves. We have a Tabor 3% reserve that sits at $9.4 million. We also have a minimum fund balance policy, which sits around $15 million. And so we have those reserves available. These are all in addition to that spendable fund balance that you guys saw earlier that we're spending into for this budget. So this really gets to the meat of the budget. As we reserve the base budgets for going into 2022, this list will show you the increases that we are proposing. So this is really the meat of the budget of, what are we proposing spending our increase and our spendable fund balance on. So I'm going to quickly go through each of these lines. Feel free to stop me if you have any questions or want me to clarify anything. And each of these items will have a separate presentation in the budget hearings on October 19th and 21st, where you'll get a lot more information than just this little snippet that I'm going to give you right now. The Clerk and Recorder's Office, we're proposing a $300,000 ongoing increase for salary equity increases that they had to give earlier this year. This Clerk and Recorder's Office, we had to do some equity increases in this summer in order to retain some staff. So this is not another increase. We used one-time funding in 2021 to be able to do that. So this would be backfilling the Clerk and Recorder's budget ongoing for those increases that we needed to do. And the salary information justified that we needed to do those increases to the DMV. Our Community Services Department for CSU Extension is requesting a part-time horticulture agent. This is the county's match to that horticulture agent. These costs are shared with Colorado State University. The county attorney's office is requesting funding for a first assistant county attorney. We have a first assistant county attorney who was just promoted to that position, but the funding for it was only in the budget at a base level county attorney, and so we used one-time funding in 2021 to be able to get that position, which our county attorney needed this year, and then next year this position would be replaced into as a base level county attorney. So I wanted to make sure that there was no question. This is not another first assistant, but we needed the funding to replace what we had to do this year. Then we have a couple county-wide critical needs that we're addressing. One is the Fountain Creek Watershed District increase. We have been informed, and that board needs about a 10% increase to their contribution from each member government, which for El Paso County is $24,000. We also are looking at needing to replace our ERP system, which is our Enterprise Resource Planning software, which to all of you means Kronos, J.D. Edwards. It's our time tracking, human capital management, and it's the largest software that we use to ensure that everything in the county is on the same page. It's our financial software, and this is approximately what we're estimating is a $10 million project. We've been working with several other local governments, several counties in the Denver metro area who've recently gone through this same project, and $10 million is about what it costs to get that done. Obviously, we're going to do a very concerted effort to make sure that that cost is as low as we can, but to ensure we continue to maintain the services for our citizens that are necessary. Our main systems are approaching end of life, which means not only that they're not going to be upgraded anymore, they won't receive support anymore as well. So our products that we're on, like J.D. Edwards, are just going to cease to be products offered by Oracle and things like that. So
Just a quick question. I know that PPACG also is going to have a fee increase. I noticed Fountain Creek Watershed, right, district increase, and PPACG is going to have one as well. And I can't remember if it's exactly 15 or 20K. And I wouldn't have thought that it would necessarily go on this chart, but you do have others that are in that dollar range.
Yeah, and we do have others. I'm aware. I've received CCI, I've received PPACG, and the PPACG, I think we felt like we could absorb it without asking for an increase. This was one we weren't anticipating, and so we hadn't allocated funding for that.
Okay, thank you.
Where was I? Oh, yes, the $10 million. So we're asking for $1 million to get that project started, to be able to do the initial stages of an ERP system replacement, making sure that we're strategically doing the correct ERP replacement in the correct way. The next line is the 2022 compensation adjustments that I talked to a little more in detail earlier of how that $7.4 million would be spent. So I don't know if there's any more questions on that, but I think I've given you all the information I have for this presentation. The next two items are for our AT department, or Digital Strategy and Technology Department, and they are just two softwares that are now in use for the county that we need to put the annual maintenance and software license fees in ongoing to their budget. The DA's office is requesting 5 additional FTEs, which is 3 DAs, a legal assistant, and a clerk. And those are funded into the 2022 budget.
And I'm sorry to interrupt, but just for your awareness, we're getting close to the 11:15 start time for the informal meeting, so you might want to think about where you break on the chart. And apologies for that, but we'll have to break somewhere and then go to that meeting and then come back.
Okay. All right. Yeah, I'll watch that very closely. Thank you, Commissioner. The next two items are one-time items for our Economic Development Department. The first is the Business Revolving Loan Fund for $1.5 million, and this is an allocation to increase our Business Revolving Loan Fund. It's a project, it's a service we already offer, but we don't have we would like to have more funding into that in order to expand the amount of businesses we're able to help with that business revolving loan fund, as well as the Housing Authority corpus. As you're aware, Housing Authority gives out low interest, long-term loans to help with affordable housing projects, and this would allow the Housing Authority to keep giving those long-term low interest loans as they are almost out of funding in the current Housing Authority corpus. And Emergency Management has 2 requests totaling $26,000 for shared costs that we have with the City of Colorado Springs, one for a part-time temporary employee to help with their reaccreditation, as well as the setting up the alternate emergency coordination center. Our facilities, this has been a plan for the last several years to increase their budget, $750,000 ongoing. The last several years, you'll remember that we have strategically put in specific projects. So we funded specific amounts for specific projects. And once we were able to complete those major deferred items, we wanted to be able to put increased ongoing funding into the facilities budget to be able to address the items as they come up and not have to come back to the BOCC each time for an emergency allocation. So this would satisfy that plan in ensuring our buildings are maintained and improved.
Sorry to interrupt, but at some point for the major facility improvements, it may be later in the chart or in a future briefing, we'll get to see what is proposed for 2022.
So I think the best place for that presentation is going to be when our facilities director, Ms. Brian Olson, presents to you in the critical need hearing on October 19th or 21st.
Right.
I don't know if he's going.
That's great. That answers the question. Thank you.
Yes, but I will let you know that what we've asked him to do, and if you want something different, is not specifically say what that $750,000 is, because we might not know what that is until mid-year or ongoing things, but to show you what kind of things he has done with the money that's been allocated to him in the past. But we absolutely can talk more to that and make sure you get the information that you need to make that decision.
I think, unfortunately, at this time, we probably have to stop with the presentation right now. I know you were hoping to get through this before 11:15, but it is what it is. And I did notice that some of the outside participants for our informal meeting at 11:15 are here. They were actually at the top of the stairs there for a second.
Awesome.
So,
All
yes,
right, well, we'll
please.
pick this up. Thank you,
Bremer?
Commissioners.
Just a moment.
I was actually just going to suggest that if you feel it's appropriate, I feel like we could get through this critical needs section.
There's
and
one more
then-
slide after it. There's 24 and 25.
All right, maybe if, Brett, you could just let
It's a-
them know we'll be a few minutes late, and then we can get through these 2 slides, or the end of this one, and then the next one, I think.
It's just a cleaner break point, I think.
Okay.
Okay.
Sounds
All right.
good. That was what I was trying to do when I was watching my watch, like, okay, I got 3 minutes, I can do this. Human Resources has requesting 3 employees, 2 business partners, and a compensation analyst. As we continue to have more regulations on hiring and more turnover, and our county administrator has asked them to do a lot of projects, we want to make sure that we're properly supporting our departments. This is one area that our countywide elected officials were very supportive of seeing more support from our Human Resources Department. Our Justice Services Department is requesting 2 employees, 1 pretrial services specialist and an admin support member for veteran services. And the pretrial is important to continue to keep our jail population low and citizens out on pretrial release. We also have a proposed increase of $30,000 to our code enforcement cleanup budget, which currently sits at $75,000 annually, so this would increase it to $105,000. Our Planning and Community Development Department is also requesting 3 additional employees, a planner, an engineer, and an inspector. As we saw in the revenue side, their businesses continued to be high, and this would help them support the increased load of development applications. Public Health, $150,000 a year ongoing, which is year 3 of a 4-year strategy that we have done to strategically increase their ongoing budget by $1 million, which was spent on what they called critical need personnel positions. And then Department of Public Works, as you can see, there's several items on here. This $11 million we've already addressed. There are 2 drainage basin studies that need to be done, one for Beaver Creek and one for Templeton Gap. In addition to that, we are allocating funds for the Acres Pond design to address a drainage issue out at our Acres facility. 3 positions for the asset management personnel to be able to track our county assets. 4 engineers into the engineering division, and 4 FTEs for our stormwater maintenance crew. And then the final amount is security, and I apologize, I just saw an error. I hate when that happens in public session. This is 4 FTEs, and I can make that change. But it's 4 FTEs for our security division, where this was a multi-year plan that our Sheriff Bill Elder presented last year to strategically increase the presence of county security, as well as turn that security department into deputized county sheriffs to ensure safety of our employees and buildings. So, and I can stop there and address the remaining slides after your other meeting.
Thank you. Are there any questions for anything presented so far at this point? And of course, we can all reserve the right to go back and ask on any of those charts when we do reconvene. All right, hearing none. Thank you so much for the presentation so far. Sorry we couldn't get all the way through it, but we do need at this point to go into recess and go to our informal meeting.
And just so you're, for
Yes.
timing purposes, so you know I have about 10 minutes left is all for the budget presentations. So
Okay, great. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So let's go into I'm sorry? Do we have an issue? Oh, yeah, time that we would reconvene, that's a good question.
Yes, that's what I would, thank you, Chair. I was just just thought it might be helpful to announce that for the public if anyone's watching, and then also Ms. Simmons. I know we have a 11:15 presentation, and then we also have, I think, an 11:45 presentation. I think Mr. Waters was suggesting 12:30 perhaps.
12:30? All right, so we'll recess and reconvene at 12:30. Thank you. All right, let's bring this Board of County Commissioners meeting back to order. And we have the recording up and running. Okay, very good. So, Nikki, I think we left off at the end of page 25. I don't know if you want to recount anything between 24 and 25 or just continue to 26.
So, Commissioners, welcome back. I had one more thing to add on the end of this slide, just showing that the ending operational savings after we have allocated the funding for the items in the preliminary balanced budget is $5.2 million. I want to be clear that that does not mean that there's $5.2 million available to appropriate ongoing, because our financial plan, and we really look at a 5-year forecast to make sure that the impact of the decisions that we make in this budget are sustainable. And so going forward into future years to 2023 and 2024, we do, some of the impact of these decisions does spend down into that fund balance. And so this is essentially a balanced budget that we are spending everything that we have available to serve our citizens in the current year. And so there's not $5 more million available for appropriation. We didn't leave $5 million on the table. And I just wanted to point that out with this chart.
Thank you.
So to wrap up this presentation, I have 2 more things to address in the county's preliminary balanced budget. One is how it associates or ties to our strategic plan. Everything that we do in the budget office, we try to ensure fits within the county's strategic plan. We're wrapping up the end of that strategic planning document this year. And so this does address many of those items in that. But we will be coming forward to you next year with a new strategic planning process, which will be a more flexible and adaptable strategic plan that will be reassessed annually. A lot of hard work is going in our digital strategy and technology department, led by Jeff Eckhart, to create a strategic plan for the county that very closely mirrors and works in conjunction with the budget process. So everything that we do, the budget and the strategic plan are in sync with each other. So really excited about that process and bringing that forward to you in the coming year. And so this will look a little bit different when we look at it next year. And then to wrap up this, the last thing I want to talk to for the county's preliminary balanced budget is the dates. So I talked earlier that we had those budget strategy sessions with the countywide elected officials and the department executive directors. Those happened on July 28th and August 20th. And then budget hearing number 1 is today, which is the presentation of the preliminary balanced budget. And this officially opens up the public comment period for this preliminary balanced budget. So we invite citizen comments. We have a printed copy of the budget open to public comment in the commissioner's office. We also have this presentation as well as the document itself online for any citizen comments, and we welcome citizen comments at all of our budget hearings, and then I would incorporate those into any presentations that we do. So the next budget hearings are October 19th and 21st. Those are when you'll hear from each department and office on the critical needs that are being funded in their preliminary balanced budget. You will also hear from your citizen outreach group about the work that they've done this year to oversee the budget process and the funds for the county. November 16th is the final direction from the BOCC on the 2022 original adopted budget. That's the day where we take we can move numbers around, that the BOCC can have the impact on the budget. You get to look at the spreadsheet in spreadsheet format and say, okay, what if we took this off or put this on? And there's no official action taken that day, but what we'll look for is head nods. So for example, if one commissioner said, could we add $500,000 to X, Y, and Z, we would look for 3 head nods to be able to do that. But the official vote on that would happen on December 7th, which is budget hearing number 5, which is where we will actually adopt the original adopted budget, certify the county mill levy for 2022 collections, and authorize the treasurer to transfer between funds. So you'll have 3 resolutions that day. But the numbers stop moving on November 16th to give us time to get the documents ready and together for that December 7th hearing. So if there's not any more questions, I can briefly walk you through the document itself.
I'll just, one quick point, the budget hearing 2 and 3, just a reminder, and perhaps it's obvious, but that's actually 2 that week, both on Tuesday and Thursday. So we'll have 2 BOCC meetings that week for those budget hearings.
Thank you for pointing that out, Commissioner. Yes, we appreciate you guys and your flexibility of meeting Thursday that week to get all of those budget hearings in. Those are long days. We have you scheduled from 9:30 until about 3 o'clock every day, full of presentations from your departments and offices to let you as well as the public know what we're doing with the additional funding and why that's necessary for our services. So the document itself, a lot of this I've already gone through because it's charts you've already seen that I put into the presentation, some pie charts just to show, when we have the general fund unrestricted category, what that's spent on. You'll see like 45% of it's spent on public safety. And then we break down things further. Sorry, that was working and then it stopped. And then when we talk about county administration, we break it into internal and external to talk to which department, just showing how things are broken down. So I always want to point out that when we say county administration up in this large chart, I think it says $60 million. Things are flying all over for me. I don't know if you guys see the same thing I'm seeing. I'm going to try to get that to stop. $60 million, that is not what you think of as typical county administration. That's not the administration office. That is all of county administration. So IT, parks, general fund, public works, things like that. And so those breakdowns are further here in the budget document to show. I'm not even pushing anything. I apologize, commissioners. There, I didn't even touch the mouse and things moved. So like public works is 13.8 million. That is just the general fund side of public works. Another important part to point out that I haven't already gone through, scrolling, it keeps doing that. So the same charts that you've seen before are here. So starting on page 17 is where I feel like it's good information to see its changes to the revenue budget. So you can see the revenue budget from last year to this year, and changes to the base budget. So this is where you can see by each department where the increases would be. This incorporates all of the increases that we proposed in the spreadsheet you saw earlier through the presentation. So the overall size, so you can see, like, for example, $54 million for the sheriff's office from general fund, and a $1.6 million increase is incorporated into that, and that's going to be primarily the 3.5% cost of living compensation allocation, things like that. That's what's in here. And then you can see, like, for example, economic development here, this $4.5 million is those 2 one-time needs. So that's how to read this chart, but all of that ties back to those increases that we showed earlier. And I really think those are the 2 most important slides to look at. This is that budget at a glance, and you can see by fund where the revenues are going in, and then if the expenditures are in personnel, operating, and capital by fund. Fund balances, we have spent available fund balances, so there are no remaining available fund balances. And allocation of expenditures by fund, and that is it. So that is my presentation for the county's preliminary balanced budget. I think I did keep that to the 10 minutes that I promised. Is there any questions that I could address for you all today to help the rest of this process go as you want it to?
Great. Are there any questions from any members of the board at this point? Okay, and I would just encourage any commissioner, if you've got additional questions or think of any questions, please reach out to the finance team, to Nikki. Do that as early as possible. That gives them time to maybe try to answer that question and maybe consider some adjustments or proposed adjustments at the next meeting. And I think that'll be helpful for the process. So if you've got anything, please bring that up. Okay, I don't see any other comments, so thank you very much for that.
Thank you.
And that's a very, very thorough presentation, and that's our good first step.